My name is Brooke Taylor. My father built a pharmaceutical empire from nothing. By the time I was born, Taylor Pharmaceuticals was already one of the most respected names in the industry. But none of that mattered to the Fosters. They didn't want me. They wanted my father's money, his reputation, his ability to keep their failing real estate empire afloat. I stood in the middle of my father's celebration party, surrounded by the same faces I had seen a lifetime ago. The chandeliers sparkled, the champagne flowed, and across the room, Caleb Foster smiled at me with those same careful, practiced eyes. He looked perfect. White shirt, perfect posture, the kind of man who knew exactly how to present himself to the world. I knew that smile better than he ever realized. I knew what lay beneath it. Last time I said yes. Last time I blushed and whispered, "I'll leave these matters to my elders," and watched every relative in that room beam with satisfaction, and my father nodded his approval. The Fosters toasted our future, and I walked straight into a cage I didn't even recognize as one until years later. I didn't know that then. Or rather, I knew it somewhere deep in my subconscious, but I chose not to see it. Because I had been in love with Caleb Foster since I was 15 years old. He was 3 years ahead of me at Churchill Academy, the perfect rich boy, captain of the debate team, accepted early to Wharton. His photo hung in the trophy case and every girl in school knew his name. I wrote him a letter once, a stupid, gushy letter confessing my feelings, and I sent it to the school radio station like a complete fool. They read it on air, along with 20 other confessions from girls who felt the same way, and my name got lost in the flood. I thought it was romantic. Now I realize it was the first sign of how easily I could disappear in his world. Last time around, I disappeared completely. Now I was standing in the same ballroom on the same night, and the same relatives were pushing me toward the same man. "Brooke, you and Caleb would make such a handsome couple. Your father and his father were practically business partners for years. You have so much in common." Caleb smiled at me from across the round table, polite and expectant. He had already been seeing Monica Hayes then. I didn't know that until our engagement night, when he got drunk and whispered her name in his sleep. Monica, the office assistant, the girl he met through a client. The girl he supposedly loved so deeply that he wanted to call off our entire arrangement. But he didn't call it off, did he? No, he let me save his family. He let me pour my father's resources into his failing company. He let me sacrifice my career, my independence, my entire identity, all while secretly resenting me for taking him away from his true love. Monica got pregnant, or at least that's what we were told. She had an abortion and left the country. Caleb blamed me for it. For the rest of our marriage, every cold look he gave me, every dismissive word, every night he spent in the guest room, he blamed me for ruining his life. He didn't think about the fact that I had saved his family from bankruptcy. He didn't think about my father's money propping up his real estate projects. He didn't think about any of it. All he saw was the woman he lost because he had to marry me. And when I finally stood up for myself, when I said one word about how Monica was manipulating him, still calling him in the middle of the night, still keeping him tethered to her even while he was married. We were in the car together. He was supposed to be driving me to my father's birthday. Monica called from a hospital, claimed she had leukemia, wanted to hear his voice one last time, but I said no. I said she had parents, she had friends, she didn't need my husband. He turned the wheel anyway. I was the one who died in the crash. I woke up back here. This time, everything is going to be different. My father, George Taylor, was watching me with fond curiosity. He never pushed me. He only ever wanted me to be happy. The guests were waiting for my answer. I smiled sweetly at the relatives who had just called us a perfect match. A childhood engagement? That's so old-fashioned, I said, letting my voice carry just enough. I'm in the pharmaceutical business. I don't know anything about selling real estate. Silence. The table went quiet. Caleb's smile faltered slightly. He wasn't used to being rejected. I watched his jaw tighten, just for a second, before he smoothed it back into a neutral expression. The relatives scrambled to recover, but the damage was done. I had said no, publicly, politely, but firmly. Caleb excused himself 15 minutes later. I watched him walk away, and for a brief moment, I felt something almost like satisfaction. But it wasn't satisfaction I was feeling. It was the calm certainty of someone who had already seen how the story ends and decided to write a different one. When everyone left, my father found me in the study. "You used to be so fond of the foster boy," he said softly. "What happened?" I forced myself to smile. "I grew up, Dad. Some people just aren't who we think they are." He studied me for a long moment. I could tell he wanted to push further, but he never did. He respected my boundaries. "If you're sure," he said finally. "But if there's something going on." "Nothing's going on. I just don't want to marry him." That wasn't a lie. I never wanted to marry him. Not anymore. The next few months moved in a blur of preparation. I told my father I wanted to pursue graduate studies in pharmaceutical research. I'd been accepted to a domestic program in my previous life, but this time I aimed higher, Oxford at a foreign university. A way to build my own reputation outside his shadow and outside the Foster family's influence. He was thrilled. "You're becoming a true Taylor," he told me, and I saw tears in his eyes. I didn't tell him that I'd failed him once before. I didn't tell him that in another timeline, I drained his company's resources trying to keep the Fosters afloat, and then I died in a car accident, and he died of a broken heart shortly after. I carried that knowledge like a scar hidden beneath expensive clothes. Then my younger cousin, Alice, showed up with gossip. Alice was always the one who knew everything. She had a network of informants in every social circle, and she loved nothing more than sharing dramatic stories. "Brooke, you dodged a bullet," she announced, settling onto my couch. "You know Caleb Foster? He's been sleeping with one of his office assistants." I I kept my face neutral. Oh, her name is Monica Hayes. She started working for him through some client event, and apparently they've been meeting behind closed doors for months. Someone caught them in his office. I knew all of this already. I knew it in excruciating detail. How did his family react? I asked, pretending to be curious. His father found out. Apparently, he flew into a rage, threatened to cut Caleb off if he didn't end it. But the kid's stubborn. He actually moved out, took Monica with him. I almost laughed. Monica Hayes, the woman who had aborted his child in my other life. The woman who called him at all hours of the night, who had him wrapped around her fingers so tightly he didn't realize she was using him for his name and his money. In my other life, I didn't know the truth about her. I accepted her as a tragic figure, the lost love my husband mourned. I tried to compete with a ghost. This time, I knew the truth. Monica Hayes would eventually leave him, when his money dried up, when his name lost its value, when she realized he was just a younger son with no real power, she would walk away. I had no intention of warning him. Let him learn the hard way. 3 months later, Alice called me again. Did you hear about Caleb and Monica? What happened? She left him. I didn't react. I had known this would happen. I had known it with the kind of certainty that only comes from living through something once already. Apparently, he lost all his family support when he moved out. His older brother took over the company, and Caleb's been reduced to working entry-level jobs. Monica found out he wasn't a billionaire, just a powerless rich kid who got cut off. She had an abortion and vanished. An abortion. I remembered that abortion. I and my other life. I had blamed myself for it. I had believed I was the reason Monica fled, the reason Caleb lost his true love. The guilt had weighed on me every single day of my marriage. Now I saw the truth. I heard she framed it as something tragic and romantic, I said dryly, but it was just a way to cut ties. Exactly. Alice lowered her voice. She was never pregnant. A friend of mine works at the clinic she supposedly visited. There's no record of any procedure. She made the whole thing up. I let that sink in. Monica Hayes had faked a pregnancy, faked an abortion, and manipulated Caleb into feeling guilty enough to leave his entire family behind. And he had been stupid enough to fall for it. In my other life, she had done the same thing to me. She kept him tethered with constant crises, leukemia, mental breakdowns, financial emergencies. Every time he tried to step away, she pulled him back with a new drama. I had been her victim. But in that previous life, I never saw it. I blamed myself for everything. I thought I was the obstacle to his happiness. I thought if I just tried harder, gave more, sacrificed more, he would finally see me. He never did. Caleb contacted me 6 months later. He asked to meet for coffee. I knew what he wanted. He had lost his family fortune, lost Monica, lost his reputation. His brother had systematically dismantled his access to any real power. His mother was trapped in a contract that forced her to be a caretaker for his ailing father. He had nothing left. And somewhere in his mind, he remembered me as the option he had rejected. He probably assumed I still loved him. I showed up to the coffee shop wearing a tailored blazer and heels that cost more than his monthly rent. I watched his face when he saw me. The slight flinch, the way his eyes flickered down to my jewelry, the calculation happening behind his expression. He had a letter with him, a letter I had written to him when I was 15. I found this among my old things, he said, sliding it across the table. You sent it to the school radio station. I never got it back then. I looked at the childish handwriting and felt nothing but embarrassment for my younger self. Someone must have written that under my name, I said calmly. I don't remember sending it. His face tightened. You don't. No. I smiled. I barely knew you in high school. You were 3 years ahead of me. We never spoke. He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. The frustration, the confusion. He had come here expecting me to be the same lovesick girl who once wrote him poetry. Instead, he found someone who looked right through him. I came to apologize, he said finally. I treated you badly. I was lost. I made mistakes. You did. I didn't elaborate. I didn't offer forgiveness. I just let the word hang in the air between us. I want to make it right, he continued. Your family still has influence. I could use some help rebuilding. There it was. Help, I repeated. You want my father's money. I want a chance to start over. Why should we give you anything? He stared at me. I stared back. Because you loved me once, he said quietly. I know you did. I leaned forward. Loving someone once doesn't mean you owe them forever, especially when they never loved you back. I stood up. Get your life together, Caleb, but don't expect me to save you. That particular chapter of my life is closed. For years past, I completed my graduate program at Oxford with honors and I developed patents in pharmaceutical research that generated millions in revenue. I met someone, an Asian American researcher, who saw me as an equal, not a meal ticket. We built a life together. We built a future. When I returned to America, I took over my father's company. He was retiring. The pharmaceutical empire he had spent 40 years building was now mine to run. I made changes, aggressive investments in research, aggressive cuts to waste, aggressive philanthropy that boosted our public image. The company grew stronger than ever before. During a university alumni event, I saw Caleb again. I almost didn't recognize him. The confident, polished young man was gone. I in his place was someone overweight, tired, worn down by years of failure. He was carrying business cards, trying to network with anyone who would speak to him, offering vague promises about a food distribution company he had started. He looked small. He looked like someone who had given up. When he approached me, I could see the hope in his eyes, mixed with shame. You're the one everyone's talking about, he said. The new CEO, the philanthropist. I heard you donated millions to the university. Just doing my part, I said. I'm sorry, Brooke. I'm sorry for everything. I was young and stupid. I thought. He trailed off. I could have been cruel. I could have reminded him of every cold word, every dismissive glance, every time he made me feel like I was ruining his life simply by being married to him. Instead, I just nodded. Everyone deserves a second chance, Caleb. I hope you find yours. I said it politely, neutrally, the same way I would speak to anyone I didn't particularly care about but didn't actively hate. It was the worst thing I could have said to him, and I knew it. Politeness from someone who used to love you is the coldest rejection of all. He started to cry. I didn't comfort him. I didn't reach out. I just let him stand there, tears streaming down his face, while I excused myself to find my husband. The man who actually loved me. The man who had never made me feel like I was a burden or a duty. The man who saw me as a partner, not a resource. I walked away from that encounter with a strange sense of peace. I had spent a lifetime chasing Caleb Foster's approval. I had sacrificed my career, my identity, my self-respect trying to be enough for him. I had died in a car accident trying to force him to choose me over Monica Hayes. And now, in this new life, I had everything I ever truly wanted. A thriving career, a loving relationship, a future I had built with my own two hands. Caleb Foster had nothing. He had no money, no family, no reputation, no power. He had squandered every opportunity he was given. He had chosen Monica Hayes over his own future, and Monica Hayes had abandoned in the moment he stopped being useful. He was the author of his own destruction. And I had simply stepped out of the way. That was the revenge. Not scheming, not plotting, not manipulating. Just stepping aside and letting him make all the wrong choices without me. But I wasn't finished yet. The knowledge I carried from my previous life gave me an advantage Caleb couldn't see. I knew his brother was already planning to take everything. I knew his mother was trapped. I knew his father was dying, and when he died, Caleb would be cut out of the will entirely. And I knew something else. Something I had discovered in my research, in the hours I spent digging into the past he had tried to bury. Caleb Foster wasn't even the real heir to the Foster fortune. His older brother had been born to a different mother. His mother had been a mistress who manipulated her way into the family. The real estate empire Caleb had been raised to expect wasn't actually his to inherit. IT was his brother's birthright, protected by legal documents Caleb had never even bothered to read. He had been set up to fail from the very beginning. And he had walked right into it. I attended his father's funeral 6 months later. Caleb was there, weeping. His brother stood to the side, dry-eyed and calm. The will was read in a private ceremony, and as predicted, Caleb was left almost nothing. His brother took the company. His brother took the properties. His brother took everything. Caleb left the funeral with nothing but a share of debt. He approached me in the parking lot, his eyes red from crying. Brooke, can we talk? No. Nothing you can say will change what happened, Caleb. I'm not the person who can help you anymore. But I need help. I know. I got into my car and drove away. A month later, I received a letter from him. It was handwritten, honest, painful to read. He told me he had spent years regretting the way he treated me. He told me he had been young, stupid, and selfish. He told me he had loved Monica Hayes in a childish way, but what he felt for her was nothing compared to what he should have felt for me. He also told me something I hadn't expected. He remembered. He remembered the crash, the accident, the moment everything went dark. I dreamed it, he wrote. I dreamed that we were married and I ruined everything, and we died together in a car accident. It felt so real. When I woke up, I thought it was a nightmare. But now I'm starting to wonder. Was it a dream? Or was it a warning? I crumpled the letter and threw it in the trash. Some questions are better left unanswered. I'm not the same person I was in that other life. I'm stronger, smarter, more ruthless in the ways that matter. I don't let anyone define my worth anymore. I don't let anyone treat me like an afterthought. Caleb Foster made his choices. I made mine. And in the end, I was the one who walked away clean. He has nothing. I have everything. And there's no greater revenge than watching someone destroy themselves while you sit back and thrive. They didn't know what I already knew. But that wasn't even the biggest mistake. I almost told them. Instead, I waited. The real surprise hadn't arrived yet. Caleb Foster's letter sat at the bottom of my trash can for exactly 2 hours before I pulled it back out. I told myself I was being thorough. I told myself I needed to know exactly what he remembered, what he suspected, what he might use against me. But the truth was simpler and more uncomfortable. I needed to know if he had seen what I had seen. The accident, the darkness, the moment when everything went black and then, impossibly, light again. I had woken up in my 22-year-old body with the memories of a woman who had lived 43 years, died in a car crash, and somehow been granted a second chance. I had assumed I was the only one. But Caleb's letter suggested otherwise. I dreamed that we were married, and I ruined everything, and we died together in a car accident. Not I died. Not you died. We. The word lodged in my chest like a splinter. I had been so focused on my own rebirth, my own second chance, that I had never stopped to consider whether anyone else had been given the same gift. Or curse, depending on how you looked at it. I folded the letter and tucked it into my desk drawer. I would deal with it later. For now, I had a company to run. Taylor Pharmaceuticals had grown significantly since I took over, and my father had built a solid foundation, but I had added the kind of aggressive expansion he had always been too cautious to attempt. New patents, new partnerships, new markets. By the time I hit my 30s, I was one of the most powerful women in the industry. Not because of my father's name, because of my own. My husband, James, was a research scientist I had met at Oxford. He was brilliant, kind, and utterly unimpressed by my wealth. He loved me because I challenged him intellectually and made him laugh. Not because I could open doors for him. That was the difference between James and every other man I had ever known. He didn't need anything from me. He just wanted me. We had 2 children now, twins, a boy and a girl. They were 7 years old and already showing signs of their mother's stubbornness. I wouldn't have traded them for anything. Not even revenge. But revenge had a way of finding you anyway. It happened at a charity gala. The event was hosted by the Anderson Foundation, a philanthropic organization that had been funding medical research for decades. My company had donated $3 million to their latest initiative, which meant I was expected to attend, smile, and network with other wealthy benefactors. I had just finished speaking with the foundation's chairman when I felt someone watching me. I turned. Caleb Foster was standing at the edge of the crowd, dressed in a rented tuxedo that didn't quite fit him properly. He looked thinner than the last time I'd seen him, more desperate. There was a manic energy in his eyes that made me uneasy. He approached me before I could excuse myself. "Brooke, you look incredible." "Hello, Caleb. I know you don't want to talk to me." His voice was tight, controlled. "But I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "I don't owe you honesty. Please." Something in his voice made me pause. Not the desperation. I had seen that before. It was something else. Something that sounded almost like fear. I gestured toward a quiet corner of the room. "You have 5 minutes." He followed me. Up close, I could see the shadows under his eyes, the tremor in his hands. This wasn't just a man who had fallen on hard times. This was a man who had been haunted. "I've been having dreams," he said quietly. "Every night. Same dream. I'm married to you, and I'm terrible to you. I ignore you. I run off to see Monica. You beg me to stay. And then..." He stopped. I waited. "And then we crash," he continued. "I'm driving. We're arguing. I look away from the road. And then everything goes dark." His voice cracked on the last word. "In the dream, I die. And I wake up here, in this life. But I can't shake the feeling that it wasn't a dream." I kept my expression neutral. "You think it was a premonition?" "I think it was real." He stared at me. "I think we lived that life. And I think somehow we both got a second chance." The air between us felt heavy. I could have denied it. I could have laughed it off, called him crazy, walked away, and never looked back. But I didn't. Because I needed to know how much he remembered. "Tell me more about the dream," I said. He blinked, surprised I was engaging with him. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. What happened before the crash." He hesitated, clearly confused by my sudden interest. But then he started talking. He described our wedding. The way I had smiled at him while he tried to hide his resentment. The years of cold silence between us. The way he had always kept Monica's photo in his phone. The way I had discovered it and said nothing. He described Monica's so-called leukemia. The phone call she made from the hospital. The argument we had in the car. The moment he turned the wheel. And then he described the crash. "I was dead," he said softly. "I felt it. Nothing. Just darkness. And then I woke up in my old bedroom. I was 22 again. Monica had just started working at my office. And my father was still healthy. Everything was exactly as it had been." He looked at me. I thought I was losing my mind and I tried to pretend it was just a bad dream. But the nightmares kept coming. And then I started noticing little things. Things I shouldn't have known. Things I had no way of knowing. "Like what?" "Like the fact that you had become a successful CEO. Like the fact that you had married someone else." He let out a bitter laugh. "I don't even know your husband's name. But I knew you would find someone better than me. I could feel it." His eyes were glassy now. "And I knew Monica would leave me. I knew it from the very beginning. But I loved her, Brooke. Or I thought I did. I couldn't help myself." "You could have helped yourself," I said flatly. "You chose not to." "I know." He nodded slowly. "That's the worst part. I knew what was coming, and I still made all the same choices. I still chose her over everything. I still threw away my future." He was confessing now, but not to me. He was confessing to himself. He needed to hear the truth spoken aloud so he could finally accept it. "Were you given a second chance?" I asked carefully. "Or were you just shown the consequences of your actions?" He looked confused. "What's the difference?" "Everything." I let the words sit between us. If he had truly been reborn, he would have made different choices. He would have stayed away from Monica. He would have built a real relationship with his family. He would have tried to become a better person. Instead, he had done the exact same things and gotten the exact same results. That wasn't a second chance. That was a preview. The universe hadn't given him another opportunity to change his fate. It had simply shown him the outcome of his choices and waited for him to fail anyway. "You were shown what would happen," I said finally, "and you still walked straight into it." Caleb's face crumpled. "That's not fair," he said. "I tried." "Did you try? Or did you just tell yourself you were trying while continuing to do exactly what you always did?" He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. It was the first time I had ever seen him truly without an answer. I left him standing in the corner of the ballroom and rejoined the party. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Caleb Foster had remembered the accident. He had remembered the crash, the darkness, the strange second life. He had spent years living in the shadow of that memory, too afraid to voice it aloud. But he had been holding something back. I could sense it in the way he spoke, the careful way he avoided certain topics. He had told me about the accident, about Monica, about his regrets. But he hadn't told me everything. I spent the rest of the gala watching him from across the room. He stood alone for most of the night, refusing drinks, refusing conversation, just staring into space like a man watching his own funeral. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. A woman approached him, blonde, sharp smile, expensive clothes that didn't quite fit the occasion. Monica Hayes. She was back in the city, and she was talking to Caleb like they were old friends. My hands tightened around my champagne glass. Monica had left him years ago. She had taken his money, faked a pregnancy, and vanished. She had nothing to gain from reconnecting with him now. He had nothing left to give her. So, why was she here? I watched the exchange from across the room. Monica leaned in close, whispering something in his ear. Caleb's face went pale. Then he nodded, shook his head, and walked away. She followed him. I caught up with them in the parking lot. Monica, it's been a long time. She turned to face me with a practiced smile. Brooke Taylor, I'm surprised you remember me. Everyone remembers you, I said coolly. You're legendary. The insult landed. I saw her eyes flicker with annoyance before she smoothed it away. I'm just catching up with an old friend, she said. Nothing to worry about. Old friend. I glanced at Caleb. Is that what you are now? He didn't respond. He was staring at the ground, his hands trembling. Whatever you're selling, I said to Monica, he can't afford it. Can't afford me. She laughed. That's what you think. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. She handed it to Caleb, who took it with shaking hands. I watched his expression shift from confusion to fear to something I had never seen in his eyes before. Desperation. I found it, Monica said softly. I've been holding on to it for years. I thought you deserved to know the truth. Caleb stared at the envelope. His voice was barely a whisper. My father was murdered. I felt the world tilt sideways. The parking lot spun around me. By who? I managed to say, who killed him? Monica smiled. You're going to want to sit down for this one, Brooke. Monica Hayes held the envelope between two manicured fingers like it was a live grenade. Caleb was frozen beside her, his face drained of all color. In the dim parking lot light, he looked like a ghost, pale, trembling, barely breathing. I should have walked away. That would have been the smart move. Whatever Monica was selling, whatever secret she had unearthed, it had nothing to do with me that I had my company, my husband, my children. I had moved on from Caleb Foster and his entire toxic family. But I didn't walk away. Because Monica Hayes had never done anything without a reason. And if she had been holding on to the secret for years, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal it, then whatever was inside that envelope was worth something. Something she thought I would care about. Open it, I said to Caleb. His hands were shaking too badly to manage the envelope. Monica rolled her eyes and took it back, tearing it open with practiced efficiency. She pulled out a stack of documents and handed them to him. I watched his face as he read. At first, nothing. Confusion. His brow furrowed slightly. Then his eyes widened. Then his hands started shaking again, worse than before. This can't be right, he whispered. This is impossible. What is it? I asked. Monica answered before Caleb could. Your husband knows your father, doesn't he, Brooke? James Taylor, the research scientist, the one who's been working with the pharmaceutical company. I stiffened. What does James have to do with any of this? Nothing directly. Monica smiled. But the company he used to work for, the one that was acquired by Taylor Pharmaceuticals 5 years ago, that company did contract work for Foster Real Estate. Document analysis, financial audits, background checks. I didn't see where this was going. So the man who ran that company, your husband's former boss, was in the hospital the night Caleb's father died. He was the last person to see him alive. Caleb looked up from the documents. His voice was hollow. The doctor who signed my father's death certificate was paid off. Someone tampered with his medical records. Someone made it look like he died of natural causes when he was actually... He couldn't finish the sentence. I took a step forward. When he was actually what? Poisoned. Caleb's voice cracked. Someone injected him with a paralytic agent that stopped his heart. It was disguised as a medication error, but it wasn't an error. The word hung in the air between us. Poisoned. I had attended Samuel Foster's funeral. I had watched his sons lower his casket into the ground. I had accepted the official story. Heart attack, natural causes, the result of years of stress and poor health. I had never questioned it, because I had never had any reason to. Why are you telling me this? I asked Monica. I'm telling you because I want you to help him. She jerked her head toward Caleb. Or rather, I want you to help yourself. I don't understand. Don't you? She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Your father was business partners with Samuel Foster for 30 years. They had contracts worth billions, and the moment Samuel died, everything changed. The contracts were voided. The business relationships ended. Your father walked away from the Foster family like they were radioactive. Because the company was failing, I said. The real estate market collapsed. It was just business. Was it? I looked at Caleb. He was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. There was fear in his eyes, yes. But there was also something else. Suspicion. The documents showed the poisoning happened 3 days before the contracts were supposed to be renewed, Caleb said slowly. The renewal would have saved the company. It would have kept my father in control. IT would have stopped my brother from taking over. I saw where this was going. You think someone in my family was involved? I don't know what I think. He ran a hand through his hair. But my brother inherited everything, and my father was the only one who knew how fragile the company really was. And your father was the only one who had the power to save us, or let us fall. I felt cold. For the first time since waking up in my 22-year-old body, I felt genuinely uncertain. In my previous life, I had assumed the Foster family's collapse was inevitable. Real estate crash, mismanagement, bad luck. I had never looked deeper. I had never asked questions. But I remembered something now, something I had pushed aside for years. The night of Samuel Foster's funeral, my father had come home late. He had locked himself in his study for hours. When I asked him what was wrong, he had smiled and said he was just tired. But his hands had been shaking, just like Caleb's were shaking now. I need time to process this, I said finally. Monica nodded like she had expected that answer. Take all the time you need, but I'd be careful who you talk to. She was looking at Caleb when she said it. And I understood. If his brother had killed their father, then Caleb was in danger. He had been cut out of the will, stripped of his power, reduced to nothing. But he was still a loose end, still a potential threat. And now he had proof. What do you want out of this? I asked Monica directly. You're not doing this out of the goodness of your heart. You're right, I'm not, she smiled. I want money. I'm not greedy, just enough to start over. 100,000, that's all. And if I don't pay, then I take the story to the press. Your husband's former boss, your father's business connections, the timing of the poisoning, all of it. She shrugged. I don't care who it hurts. Caleb looked horrified. You can't. Shut up. Monica's voice was ice. You don't get a say in this. You ruined my life once. The least you can do is let me profit from your misery. She walked away before either of us could respond. Caleb and I stood in the parking lot alone. The envelope was still in his hands. He clutched it like it was the only thing keeping him standing. Brooke, I need to tell you something. Don't. This isn't about. I said don't. I took a step back. Whatever you're going to say, I don't want to hear it. I've already heard too much tonight. I'm not confessing anything, he said. I'm warning you. My brother doesn't just have the power to kill. He has the power to destroy everything you've built. I felt the heat leave my face. What does that mean? I can't prove it, but after my father died, my brother made it his mission to ruin every family that had ever done business with ours. He wanted to erase all traces of my father's legacy. He started with the weakest ones first, small investors, minor partners. He paused. Your father was next on his list, but you swooped in and took over the company before he could make his move. I processed that. You're saying your brother is planning to attack my company? I'm saying he's been planning it for years. He has a file on every business partner your father ever had. He knows your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities, He stopped abruptly. What? Your husband's research patents. Caleb's voice was tight. My brother has been funding a competing pharmaceutical company for the last 3 years. They're working on a drug that would make one of your most profitable patents obsolete. I felt like the ground had opened beneath my feet. James had been working on a new class of antidepressants. The research was cutting edge and potentially lucrative. If someone was developing a competing drug, how do you know this? I met him last month. He offered me a position at his new company, a no-show job. Easy money. Caleb's mouth twisted. He said he didn't want me to starve, but really he wanted to keep me close. Keep me quiet. Did you take the job? No. He looked at me. Not yet. There was something in his voice, a note of hesitation, a question he was afraid to ask. I'll pay Monica, I said abruptly. 100,000. She can have it by tomorrow morning. You're buying her silence? I'm buying time. Your brother doesn't know I know. That gives me an advantage. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to James, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything I had learned. Monica's revelation, Caleb's warning, the possibility that my own father had been involved in something terrible. But the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. My father was not a murderer. He was a businessman, a pragmatist. He might have walked away from a failing partnership. He might have let the Foster family sink. But he would never have killed anyone to make it happen. Unless he had been protecting someone. Unless he had known something about the Fosters that I didn't. I found the file at 4 a.m. It was hidden in a safe in my father's old study, a room he never used anymore. I had the combination from a previous life, when I had found his will and other important documents. The file was thick. Decades of correspondence between my father and Samuel Foster. Contracts, legal agreements, and a single, handwritten note dated 2 weeks before Samuel Foster's death. The renewal is off. I can't do it anymore. Samuel has become unpredictable. There are things happening at Foster Real Estate that I can't be associated with. Not just bad business. Bad people. My daughter is getting married. Soon I need to protect her. The note wasn't signed. But I recognized the handwriting. It was my father's. I sat in the dark of his study, the note trembling in my hands, trying to piece together what I had just discovered. My father had known something. He had been afraid of Samuel Foster, and he had deliberately distanced himself from the Fosters just before Samuel died. But why? And what had he meant by bad people? I called Caleb the next morning. We need to meet, alone, somewhere private. Brooke, just do it. Bring the documents. I'll bring something too. We met at a diner on the outskirts of the city. IT was the kind of place no one from our social circles would ever be caught dead in. Faded plastic boots, weak coffee. A waitress who didn't recognize either of us. I told Caleb about the note. He listened without interrupting. When I was done, he was quiet for a long moment. I think your father knew my father was going to be killed, he said finally. I think he was trying to protect himself from getting pulled in. You think he knew the killer? I think he knew who. Caleb's voice was steady, and I think he knew exactly why. He pulled out the documents Monica had given him and spread them across the table. This is the financial audit my father commissioned 3 months before he died. Look at the numbers. I looked. The auditor had identified a pattern of irregularities, money disappearing from company accounts, property sales that never appeared in the official ledgers, and a single, consistent beneficiary of the missing funds. A subsidiary company owned by Samuel Foster's wife, Caleb's mother. She was bleeding the company dry, I said slowly, for years. More than that, Caleb pointed to a line item. This subsidiary company was connected to an offshore account. The account was used to pay off powerful people, politicians, judges, law enforcement. My mother was running a bribery network out of my father's company, and he never did anything to stop her. Because she was his wife. Because she had leverage. Caleb's expression was grim. She knew about my brother's involvement in several illegal deals. She had documentation. If my father tried to stop her, she would expose him. And he would lose everything. Your mother killed him, I said quietly. She had the means and the motive. Yes. But your brother is the one who took over. He's the one who inherited everything. Because she made a deal with him. Caleb's voice was hollow. She helped him take over the company in exchange. He protected her. He made sure the audit disappeared. He made sure no one ever knew about the bribes. And now your mother is trapped in a nursing home. Because my brother needed her out of the way. She knows too much. He can't kill her, too risky. But he can keep her isolated, controlled, silent. I sat back in the booth. The picture was clearer now. A family built on lies, corruption, murder. And in the middle of it, Caleb Foster, the son who had been kept in the dark because he had been easier to manipulate that way. My brother is going to kill your father, Caleb said suddenly. If he hasn't already tried. I felt my heart stop. What? Your father was the only one who knew the truth. He was the only one who could connect the dots. My mother might have been the one who pulled the trigger, but my brother was the one who orchestrated everything. He's been covering it up for years. I was already dialing my father's number. No answer. I called the housekeeper. No answer. I called the hospital where my father had been scheduled for a routine checkup. He left an hour ago, Mrs. Taylor. He said he had a meeting. He didn't say with whom. My hands were shaking. Caleb grabbed my arm. Brooke, listen to me. My brother wouldn't be stupid enough to make a move during the day. Too public. Too risky. He'll wait for nightfall. Then we have until nightfall. Exactly. I spent the next 6 hours in a state of controlled panic. Caleb helped me piece together a plan that we contacted a private investigator, a former FBI agent who had done work for Taylor Pharmaceuticals in the past. We tracked my father's phone to an address I didn't recognize. A warehouse on the edge of the city. The same address where Caleb's brother had been seen meeting with business partners. Your father went there voluntarily, Caleb said. He must have known what was waiting for him. Or he was trying to protect me. We drove to the warehouse with the investigator following at a safe distance. The building was dark, industrial, the kind of place where bad things happened because no one was watching. I should have been afraid. I should have been terrified. Instead, I was angry. I had survived a car accident. I had survived a marriage to a man who hated me. I had survived being used, discarded, and finally killed. I was not going to let anyone take my father. We entered through a side door. Inside, the warehouse was empty, silent. And then I heard a voice from the shadows. Brooke, I was hoping you'd come. Caleb's brother, Nicholas Foster, stepped into the dim light. He was older than I remembered, but just as calculating, just as cold. Where's my father? I demanded. Right here. Nicholas gestured toward a corner of the warehouse. My father was sitting in a chair, bound and gagged, but alive. I breathed for the first time in hours. You look relieved, Nicholas said. That's good. I want you to feel hope. It'll make what happens next so much more satisfying. Nicholas Foster's smile was the most predatory thing I had ever seen. He stood in the center of the warehouse like a spider who had just watched his prey walk into the web. Behind him, my father struggled against his restraints, his eyes wide with fear. He was trying to warn me, trying to tell me to run. I didn't run. I had spent years building a life that Nicholas Foster couldn't touch. I had built a company, a reputation, a family. I had survived death itself and come back stronger. Nicholas was just a man. A desperate, greedy man who had already lost everything that truly mattered. You've been busy, I said calmly, kidnapping elderly men, threatening their families. Is this how the Foster Empire operates now? Nicholas laughed. The Foster Empire is dead. Long live the Foster Empire. He gestured around the warehouse. This is what's left of a few scraps of power to a few people I can still control. But you, he pointed at me, you have everything, and I'm going to take it from you. How? Your father killed my father. Nicholas's voice was cold. I have proof, emails, financial records, a signed confession I coerced out of him an hour ago. He held up a piece of paper. I didn't believe him. Neither did my father. I could see it in his eyes. The absolute denial. The refusal to confess to something he hadn't done. Your father was there the night Samuel died, Nicholas continued. He visited the hospital. He had access to the medications. He had the motive. My father was going to expose the Taylor family's financial irregularities. Your father couldn't afford he couldn't risk losing everything he'd built. It was a good story. It was also completely false. But Nicholas didn't need the truth. He just needed the accusation to stick. He needed something to leverage against me, something that would make me willing to give him whatever he wanted. And what's your price? I asked. How much do you want to keep quiet about this fabricated confession? Everything. Nicholas smiled. Your company, your patents, your husband's research, all of it. You'll sign over controlling interest in Taylor Pharmaceuticals to me within the hour, or I release this document to the press. You're insane. I'm practical. He stepped closer. You built a multi-billion-dollar empire in less than a decade. Congratulations. Now I'm going to run it. I'd rather burn it to the ground than let you touch it. That can be arranged. Nicholas pulled out a phone. I have a video of your father confessing to the murder. It's edited to look convincing. In an hour, it will be on every news network in the country. Your company's stock will plummet. Your reputation will be destroyed. Everything you've worked for, gone. I looked at my father. He was shaking his head violently, tears streaming down his face. He was trying to tell me that the confession was coerced, that he had never hurt anyone. I believed him. I also knew something Nicholas didn't know. I had been recording this entire conversation. The wire in my lapel had been transmitting to a secure server for the last 10 minutes. My investigator was listening to everything, and he had already notified the authorities. You don't have the leverage you think you do, I said calmly. You've already lost. Have I? You're surrounded. My private investigator has called the police. They're probably on their way right now. Nicholas's composure cracked for just a moment. You're bluffing. Am I? I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, and I pressed a button. A voice came through the speaker. This is Detective Marsh, that we've got the warehouse surrounded. Hostage situation. I repeat, the building is surrounded. Nicholas's face went pale. How did you? Did you really think I would walk into a trap without preparation? I shook my head. You've been underestimating me from the very beginning. That's your fatal flaw, Nicholas. You see women as obstacles, not as threats. He lunged toward me. He was fast, strong, desperate. But I had been trained in self-defense for years. I had made sure I would never be helpless again. Not in a car, not in a marriage, not in a warehouse. I sidestepped his attack and drove my elbow into his ribs. He crumpled. I heard him wheeze, gasping for air. Before he could recover, I was on him, pinning his arms behind his back with a twist that made him cry out. Stay down, I said calmly, or I'll break your arm. He stayed down. The police arrived 90 seconds later. They swarmed the warehouse, securing the scene, cutting my father loose from his restraints. He was shaken but unharmed, just tired, just frightened. I held him while he cried. I'm sorry, he whispered. I try to protect you from all of this. I never wanted you to know. Know what? He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. The truth. I didn't get the whole story until we were back at the police station. It came out in fragments. My father's confession, Nicholas's testimony, Caleb's corroborating evidence, Monica's financial documents. But the truth was simpler than I had expected. Samuel Foster hadn't been murdered by anyone. He had died of a heart attack. The poisoning Monica had discovered was a lie, a fabrication she had created to extort money from Caleb. The document she had shown us was forged. The hospital records were altered. Everything she told us had been a web of deception. It was all a setup, my father explained. Monica Hayes and Nicholas Foster were working together. They wanted to create the illusion that I was involved in a murder. They wanted to blackmail me into giving them control of Taylor Pharmaceuticals. And Samuel really died naturally? Coronary failure. The autopsy confirmed it. I had my own doctors look at the records years ago, when I first started suspecting something was wrong. My father's voice was tired. I knew Monica was scheming, that I just didn't know how far she would go. I thought back to the conversation in the parking lot. Monica's cold confidence, her insistence that she had proof, her demands for money. She had been playing both sides the entire time. She had convinced Nicholas that my father was a threat. She had convinced Caleb that his father had been murdered, and she had been planning to extort both families for years. Where is Monica now? I asked. Detective Marsh arrested her outside the warehouse. She was waiting in her car, probably hoping to film the whole confrontation and sell the footage to a tabloid. And Caleb, cooperative. He's been providing evidence against his brother for the last hour. My father smiled weakly. I think he's finally realized that loyalty to his family is a losing game. I wasn't sure I could say the same about myself. Because the more I learned about this conspiracy, the more I realized how close I had come to being pulled back into the Foster family's orbit. If I had trusted Monica, if I had believed her lies, if I had let fear drive me back into Caleb's arms, I could have lost everything. Again. The trial lasted 6 months. Nicholas Foster was convicted on multiple charges: conspiracy to commit extortion, kidnapping, attempted assault, and a dozen other lesser crimes. He was sentenced to 15 years in a federal prison. Monica Hayes pled guilty to fraud and extortion in exchange for a reduced sentence. She was sentenced to 5 years, with a possibility of early release for good behavior. Caleb Foster testified against his brother. He received immunity for his cooperation and walked away free. But he had burned every bridge he ever had. No family, no money, no future. I watched him leave the courthouse on the final day of the trial. He looked broken, smaller than I remembered. A man who had made every wrong choice and was now paying the consequences. He approached me in the parking lot. "I'm sorry, Brooke." "You've said that before." "I know, but this time I mean it." He looked at me with hollow eyes. "I had everything, and I threw it away that I had you, and I threw you away that I had my family, and they destroyed themselves. I've got nothing left. That's not my problem." "I know." He nodded slowly. "I'm not asking for help. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. I finally understand what I lost." He walked away. I watched him go. I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't feel relief. I just felt nothing. He had been such a large presence in my life for so long, and now he was just a stranger, a ghost. A reminder of what I had survived and overcome. I went home to my family. James was waiting with our children. They had been at his parents' house during the trial. They didn't know the details. They just knew Mommy had been busy, and now she was coming back. My daughter ran into my arms first. "Mommy, I missed you." My son followed, wrapping his small arms around my legs. I knelt down and hugged them both, tears streaming down my face. I had come so close to losing everything. Not just my company, not just my reputation, my family, the life I had built with James, the future I had created for my children. And I had saved it all. Not through luck, not through chance. Through my own strength, my own intelligence, my own willingness to face the past and not let it control me. James came to stand behind me. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. "Everything is perfect." He kissed the top of my head. I looked up at him. This man who had never wanted anything from me except love. This man who had seen me at my most guarded and still chosen to trust me. This man who had stood by me through every revelation, every trial, every moment of doubt. "You're my second chance," I said softly. "You and the kids. You're everything I never knew I needed." "I know," he smiled. "I've always known." The aftermath was quiet. Taylor Pharmaceuticals continued to thrive under my leadership, and I expanded our philanthropic efforts, focusing on research that genuinely helped people. I mentored young women entering the pharmaceutical field. I made sure my company was a place where competence mattered more than connections. My father retired to a comfortable life. He spent his days gardening, reading, and spoiling his grandchildren. He never talked about the conspiracy. He never talked about the trial. He just lived. And I let him. Because the past was finally behind us. All of it. 1 year after the trial ended, I received a letter from Caleb. It was brief. Just a few lines on a plain white card. "Brooke, I'm getting my life back together. Slowly. I've started a small business. Nothing fancy. Just enough to support myself. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I'm finally becoming the person I should have been all along. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. Caleb." I read the letter twice. Then I put it in a drawer and closed it. I didn't respond. He didn't need my response. He needed to build his own life on his own terms without relying on anyone else to save him. That was what I had done. That was what he needed to do too. On the evening of my 40th birthday, I stood on the balcony of my penthouse apartment, looking out over the city. James came to stand beside me. "Thinking about something?" "Everything," I said, "and nothing." He laughed. "That's not very specific." "I'm just grateful." I leaned into him. "For all of it, the good and the bad, everything that brought me here." "I'm grateful too." He wrapped his arms around me. "For you, for the kids, for this life we've built together." We stood in comfortable silence for a long moment. Then I heard a familiar sound from inside the apartment. My children's laughter, their delighted shrieks as they played with their grandfather. I smiled. This was what mattered. Not revenge, not vindication, not proving anything to anyone. This. The quiet moments. The love of a family. The peace that came from knowing you had finally made peace with your past. When I died, really died for the final time, I wanted to go out like this, surrounded by the people I loved, looking out over a city that had given me everything and taken nothing. I had been given a second chance. And I had used it well. Not by destroying my enemies. Not by lording my success over the people who had wronged me, but by building something they could never take away. A life that was truly my own. They didn't know what I already knew, but that didn't matter anymore. Because I had already won. In the only way that counted.